Hello and welcome to this episode of Hypnotist Bernays Exposition. Joining us tonight is Dr. Dwight Damon. How are you doing, sir?
Terrific.
Terrific.
Nice to be here, Bernie.
Our pleasure to have you here. So, a lot of our viewers have the same kind of questions for you. Tell us, what are the early days like at the National Guild of Hypnotists?
Well, the early days, that'd be about 60 years ago. We're just celebrating our 60th anniversary.
Right.
And we started in Boston, and of course your show covers
Right.
that area, Cambridge and Boston. And it was a gathering of people. Basically, in those days, 1950, our group was comprised mostly of stage hypnotists and hypnologists, meaning people who were just interested in hypnotism. And probably we had 5% who actually had practices. These were psychologists and so forth. In fact, the first class that I took, I had studied hypnotism before when I was in prep school.
Wow.
You know, we bought a book, learned how to do it, and I don't know if I hypnotized a lot of fellow students and faculty members, but I bored them anyway. And so when I was in Boston attending Emerson College, I saw a sign and it said, "Learn genuine hypnotism." Not make-believe hypnotism, but genuine. And I thought that was kind of quaint, but I was on my way to a fraternity rush party, and so I rushed instead to go to learn about hypnotism, because I had been a boy magician, a professional magician. My family had a theatrical agency, and so I'd been performing since I was 12 or 13 years old. And I said, well, that sounds really interesting to learn to hypnotize. And so I went to the hotel where there was a free lecture demonstration. And this gentleman was there who had a goatee and slick back hair. Sort of looked like Errol Flynn, if anybody remembers who Errol Flynn was. And a very strange accent. And I thought, I wonder what country he's from. And but I watched the lecture demonstration and saw him hypnotize people. And he told that he was starting a class in Boston, and I said, well, gee, I'd like to take that class, even though I don't know what country he's from, because he had this strange voice. But he had what people think of as a classic hypnotist look, Van Dyke, and a ptosis of the eyelids. The eyelids actually were very narrow. And so I applied, and it was, back in those days, it was $50 for 10 lessons.
Oh, wow.
Well, in 1950, $50 was a little more, worth a little more than it is today. $50 today is going out to a nice restaurant maybe, and not leaving a tip. So I arranged to go. I called my dad at home. I was only just turned 17 when I was attending college here, and so I said I want some money to take an extra course, extracurricular course. And he said, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's going to help, with my studies at Emerson College. And he said, well, what is it? And so I had to tell him. I said, well, I'm going to take a course in hypnotism.
Wow.
And my dad and mother had always encouraged me in my show business. And he said, well, all right. So, well, that was done, now I had the money. And so I went to my first lesson. To catch up with the class, which already had started, I had to go for a private lesson. And when I approached Dr. North, he was staying at a hotel, and the door was open. He's at his typewriter, and I knocked on the door, and I said, hello, and he's busy typing. And it wasn't an electrical typewriter in those days. It was an old hard manual typewriter. And hello, and no reaction. So I stepped inside the door, and he turned around and he said, oh, hello, young man. And I thought, I wonder what country he's from. And then he explained to me that he was stone deaf, that he couldn't hear. And so he had a very strange intonation to his voice. He talked like this. And so, well, that was fine. I certainly could understand him, and so I had my first lesson. Then I went to the class, because I was living in Boston, and in our class, the first class that he did in Boston, the chief of psychiatry at one of the most famous hospitals in Boston was there. He's probably passed now. He was an older gentleman, and we had somebody else that was a lawyer, and we had several professional men, and there were only three of us that were college students.
Right. Okay.
And so the three of us sort of chummed around together.
Right.
And then the three of us actually, until recent years, were all members of the National Guild.
Right.
Well, Dr. Rixford L. North finally moved from the hotel we were at, and I don't remember which one that was, and he moved over to Huntington Chambers, which is now, I think, long gone. It was in Copley Square.
Okay.
And there was a big auditorium there, but upstairs there were offices.
Right. Right.
So he had an office with a classroom.
Right.
And that's when I started helping him part-time.
Right.
And then he made a move to St. Botolph Street, which was sort of the bohemian area of Boston at that time. Right. Old brownstones, there were artists that lived there and actors and so forth. Vesper George Art School was there.
Right.
And we had a much larger setup, very large room for lectures and private office and so forth, and an attached apartment, and it was very nice.
Right.
And so that's where the National Guild really started.
Oh, really?
And it was mainly just a group of guys that got together from the Boston area.
Right.
And Dr. North did a free lecture demonstration every Monday, as I remember, in the evening. And so we would always be there, as well as newer people who wanted to come in. And then afterwards, there was a Hayes Bickford cafeteria around the corner in Copley Square. So we'd all go there and talk about hypnotism. It was just a friendly group. And then somebody came up with the idea of, well, we ought to really start an association, you know. And so in 1950, we sort of organized it, but it became formalized in 1951 as the National Guild of Hypnotists. And it was really local. And then pretty soon we started publishing the Journal of Hypnotism, and it was about Reader's Digest size, not that many pages, but it was a small little magazine. And that went out, and pretty soon we had a chapter in New York City, and then we had a chapter on the West Coast and one in Chicago. And it started building. There became a lot of interest. And another entrepreneur, a hypnotist down in New Jersey, Harry Aarons, they were friendly with us. And back in those days, you bought a book on hypnotism for like $3 in the mail. You know?
That's right.
And it's what we would say today is like a booklet almost.
That's true. Yeah.
And so he was also in the business and joined with Dr. North and the National Guild. And when we said that we were going to form the National Guild, he said, well, you won't even take in enough to pay for the postage, you know, to notify people. But nevertheless, we did, and then it started growing, and the interest started growing. And later he wrote for the Journal of Hypnotism, but then finally he saw the light, and so he started his own organization, the AEH, the Association for the Advancement of Ethical Hypnosis. So AEH and the Guild sort of were competitors. Well, I went off to the service. I was in the service and still was roving reporter wherever I would go on land. I was in the Coast Guard. But where I was in New York City, then I met people there and I would interview them and so forth and send in my reports. And when I came out of the service, I was then married and we had one child. And so I decided to go back to college out in Iowa and get my degree as a chiropractic physician. And so I went to Iowa. And still stayed very much in touch with Dr. North because I was sort of family. You know, he came up to New Hampshire on the holidays when I was working with him and with my family for Christmas and so forth. And so I was probably the closest he had to a relative. And we kept in, and back then we didn't have email, and we didn't have, you know, the internet and all of that. So it was strictly writing letters. And of course he couldn't answer the phone. So I received letters from him, and he was going up to Maine to do a lecture demonstration, and he disappeared. That was it. We never saw him again. And, you know, there's all sorts of rumors about how he disappeared. He got hit by a bus because he didn't hear the bus coming, and things like that. He went to Chicago on business and got mugged and died. And, you know, we just don't know what happened to him. And because he was the leading force of the National Guild of Hypnotists, it really sort of disbanded. And there were maybe a dozen of us, maybe 6 or 8, who kept in touch.
Okay.
The other two college students and myself, and a few others that we knew. And we'd put out a little newsletter every once in a while. But it was very loose that in those days. It lost its identity as an organization because, for example, I was now going to college. I didn't have time for that. And other people were going to college or were just going into business. And so, although we kept in touch, we really didn't do anything. And AEH, which it was a spin-off, became the big organization.
Yes, they were,
Now that was, as I say, about 60 years ago, maybe 59 years ago. So we pursued our different interests in our business. I opened my chiropractic clinic in New Hampshire when I graduated, and Frank Anderson was in electronics engineering, and the other member, Carvel, the three of us who were chums in the first class, Carvel went off and was working for the CIA.
Oh, wow.
And he kept, he was in various countries I'd never heard of, but he was, he became a linguist, and he was very good. But we all kept our interest in hypnotism. So when many, many years later, and I'd say probably 1968, we said, well, it's time now because we need to bring our interest back to the National Guild of Hypnotists. And instead of 6 members, we need to have more, because we were down to 6 members. And so a friend of mine who I had mentored and learned magic from me and learned hypnotism from me had a seminar business. And I wasn't into computers, but I went to his office and he showed me how he could keep track of all these things all over the country. He knew how many people were attending a seminar in Omaha on a certain day and so forth. And I said, gee, that's really great. And I said, do you have a way that you could help us with the guild? And he said, yes. And that was Elsom Eldridge.
Oh, wow.
And so Elsom said, sure. So we went into his computer system. And we went from half a dozen members up to now. I remember his saying to me a few years later, he said, wow, if you keep going the way you are, you're going to have 1,000 members before you know it. And I said, well, that'd be nice. But it was nice when we had less than 1,000 because I knew everybody. And the office was in my office, my chiropractic office. So people would call me about chiropractic, but they would also call me about the National Guild of Hypnotists. And bit by bit we grew. So we went from that very basic number, as I say, in about 1960, about 86, I would say, 1986. And to where now we have roughly 12,000 members in 71 countries. So we certainly have grown, and we reactivated the National Guild publication, the Journal of Hypnotism, and it went from Reader's Digest size to Cosmo size or Life magazine, things, a very large size magazine. And we do not go to e-zines. We still publish hard magazines, hard copy. And we also have the Hypnogram, which is a newsletter. So all our members get 4 issues of the Journal of Hypnotism a year, and they all get 4 issues of the Hypnogram. And we have wonderful writers on our in our group who have regular columns, and we have guest columns as well. A lot of information out there. And of course, many times I think, wow, if I hadn't become interested in computers, this would never happen. And we could never operate in 71 countries if we weren't computerized. We have a website, ngh.net. People can go there and get information about us. And really what we've done is to create an organization and a profession. Because we said, well, we need to be a separate and distinct profession. We're not, it's a tool that can be used by psychologists and psychiatrists and psychotherapists. But on the other hand, it's something that we can also do. And we say that we work with ordinary, everyday people for ordinary, everyday problems of living. And everybody has some problem that might respond to hypnosis. And we don't cure people. It's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. But it's almost like from womb to tomb. Because we have people who specialize in hypnofertility.
That's true.
There are many couples, I'm sure your viewers would know, couples who they want to have a child and they just can't seem to have that child. They go to the specialist and so forth. And then, as soon as they adopt a child,
right.
she gets pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And that's because her mind-body association has changed.
Quite a lot.
She's no longer trying
right.
too hard.
Right.
Is what she was doing.
Right.
But with the help of hypnosis, we're able to help those people,
right.
and then suddenly they're pregnant.
Right.
And then we have people who specialize in hypnobirthing.
Right.
So when
right.
that lady becomes pregnant,
right.
then she can have hypnosis help
right.
for an easier childbirth.
Right.
And I have a couple of grandchildren we call the hypno
right.
twins,
right.
and they were born with hypnosis, and as that's all she needed, you know,
right.
to avoid having an uncomfortable and painful childbirth.
Right.
So, and then we work with children as they're growing. We have pediatric hypnosis. Right. There's a fine book that one of my best friends has written, Don Martin, and it's called Raising Your Children with Hypnotism.
Right.
And this is, you know, regular people can buy this book. They
right.
don't have to learn.
True, yeah.
It's not a matter of you have to learn to be a hypnotist,
right.
but it's using the hypnotic principles
right.
to help your children.
Right.
And we have people who work with children for test
right.
anxiety,
right.
for ADD, ADHD,
right.
and there's so many things that you know you can work with children as they're growing, behavior problems,
right.
and then they get a little older. You can have sports
right.
that they want to become more proficient in
right.
different sports. And first thing you know, you're working with them as adults
right.
for all of the
yes.
problems we have.
Yes.
They want to stop smoking. They
right.
want to lose weight.
Right.
They might be taking exams for a
right.
bar exam or something right. like that. And then finally, when people reach the age of retirement,
right.
we have people who work with the elderly.
Right.
You know, and there are many things that when people reach an age of retirement that they can use hypnosis. I mean, they really need it
right.
because they have high blood pressure. They need
right.
to learn to relax. They have
That's
stress.
Yeah.
They worry. Their partner might be
right.
sick, and so,
yes.
or they might lose them, and then
right.
they're grieving, and they can't come out of the shell.
Right.
And a good hypnotist can help them
right.
to resolve these
right.
problems. And it's not just putting people in a trance,
right.
but it's helping them to help themselves.
Right.
A lot of people think that when you're hypnotized, you know, the hypnotist has power
right.
over you.
Yeah.
And you know, Bernie,
right.
that
yeah.
nobody has any power over you. All hypnosis is really self-hypnosis.
Yes.
But our hypnotists, our
right.
consulting hypnotists, know what to do to help you
right.
to really hypnotize yourself.
Right.
They know the steps to put you through.
Right.
And so that's really what we do.
Great.
Now we're celebrating our 60th anniversary,
Great.
and we just had our convention.
Right.
Our first convention, I think it was 25 or 26 years
right.
ago, was in Danvers, Mass, and we had 250 people who attended.
Right. Where did you get the idea?
To hold the convention?
To hold the convention, yeah.
Well, we just thought we were getting so many members, we should have a way to get them all together.
Oh. It was revolutionary at the time, right?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah. And our conventions now, we have anywhere, you know, from, well, I don't know, around 1,700 people attend.
Oh, wow.
And we have 200 adjunct faculty members. These
right.
are people who present, some for
right.
the first time,
right.
some are well accomplished, and they do
right.
a whole day's training.
Right.
And we have many, many different things. We have 14 different things going on every hour for 3
right.
days.
Wow.
So there's 14 things that people can choose from.
Right.
Some are certification courses.
Right.
We teach people to become
right.
certified consulting hypnotists.
Right.
And we also teach people to teach
right.
that course.
Right.
So we're right up there. We've done a lot of work in legislation.
Right.
We've been here in Massachusetts. We've spoken with the legislators about having either a license or registration act.
Right.
And we finally found out after spending a lot of time doing
right.
this that most state governments aren't interested in,
right.
in another committee.
Right.
Because it's more expense for them,
right.
and then they have to have somebody to administer this.
Right. Right.
And I was told by legislators, for example, in New Hampshire, look, you're doing fine
right.
just the way it is.
Right.
And the National Guild keeps control over people. They know
okay.
what they're doing. You have a fine ethics committee,
right.
and you can do what you want to do
right.
now. So there's really no reason
right.
that the state should legislate it.
Right.
But occasionally we'll see a situation. About 2 years ago up in Canada, up in Ontario, there was a bill being passed by the psychotherapist, which would affect our members in an adverse way. That we would have to come under their control. And we don't want that to happen, because we're recognized now as a separate and distinct profession, and we take care of our own problems. We have a wonderful ethics.
So what kind of action did you take?
In Toronto, what we did, we also are associated with the union. We have what we call the NFH 104, National Federation of Hypnotists 104, and it's connected with OPEIU, which is the Office of Professional Employees International Union, which is in the U.S. and Canada, and they're also associated with the AFL-CIO CLC. And so we found that although we're not really, we don't really need unions for contract negotiations or anything like that. And nevertheless, they do have a lot of ability to get to legislators. They have good legislative power. And so they're able to introduce us to different legislators. In different states where we've had problems, they were able to provide a lobbyist who is actually, let's say, the state president of the FL-CIO in Connecticut. He came right up, he was our lobbyist, because he knew all the legislators, and so he could present our picture, our story. And Massachusetts, it was introduced, a bill was introduced by a friendly legislator. However, like any state, they have a way of doing this that indicates to the other legislators, I did these people a favor because they're my constituents. However, I don't really care if you vote for this bill or not. And so it never went anywhere. You know, and that's their privilege to do. And that's the political thing that politicians do. They play the game. And so there are no hard feelings. We appeared there, but we never got a chance to speak. In New Hampshire, we did get a chance to actually appear before a committee, and they said, well, you really don't need any protection. If any other profession, meaning psychological or anything like that, is impinging on you and your right to practice in New Hampshire, then you come back to us, and we'll be there to help you know, put in the proper legislation to protect your members. And that really is sufficient. We have some states where, we only have a couple of states where there actually is a registration law. Connecticut is one, and I think out in Utah is one. Indiana had a law, and it was just a very poorly written law. It favored another group. It was very difficult. We had to take we had the ACLU involved. We had to sue the board because we wanted, when we introduce any legislation, it's not just for the members of the National Guild of Hypnotists. It's for all hypnotists. And unfortunately, that bill was introduced by another group who wanted to exclude us. Well, after, I think it's been 5 years, finally the state said, well, this is kind of a useless bill. It costs us money to administer, and nobody can pass the test because it's meant for other people. And I hate to say it was rigged, but it was just not a fair type of situation. And so July 1st, they rescinded the bill, among other bills. They just wiped out a lot of useless bills. So that's fine. That makes us very happy. And registration acts, for example, in Connecticut, you provide all the information, you pay your fee, and they send you a permit. And if you don't have one, they come, you know, knocking on your door and tell you to cease and desist practicing. And I think that's good. And we come under the same laws as licensed health professionals. If there's anything attached to malactions against your clients. In other words, you do something wrong with the clients, or especially of a sexual nature. If that ever happened, then you are the same as an MD or anything else, as far as the law is concerned, and you are facing a felony. You know, so they have that written right into the law. And that's a good thing.
That's a good thing, yes.
Because we want the public to be protected. We want them to know that if they're going to somebody, usually if they're going to somebody who is a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists, they can be quite assured that you know, they're going to somebody who is qualified. And if they ever have problems, they can call us and inquire, well, or you know, is this a person legitimate? And because there's really no requirements. Anybody could say they've they're a hypnotherapist, or they're a hypnotist,
That's
or a consulting hypnotist.
Right.
But since the consulting hypnotist term is one that we use,
Right.
you probably wouldn't find anybody who is not qualified using that.
Right, that's true.
You know, they would call themselves something else.
Right.
And so, and we have, as I said, we have a wonderful ethics committee.
Right.
If they get complaints, they act on them. And I think, I don't know if I told you before, we have 2 ministers,
Right.
a nurse,
Right,
a
right.
psychotherapist,
Right.
and a lawyer on that
Right.
committee.
Wow.
So everybody, if somebody had a complaint against a member of our organization,
Right.
they take it very seriously. The member gets a chance to answer the allegations,
Right.
and the committee acts on it. And
Right.
if they find that the complaint is valid,
Right.
and then the person is dropped from our roles.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
That's great. So we have about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Tell us, where do you see the guild is going
Well,
from this
since
point
we've
of the
established the fact that we now are a separate and distinct profession, and this is pretty well established. There's a website called Hypnosis, P-N-O-S-I-S.
Okay.
I think you're acquainted with it,
Yes.
Ralph Benko.
Yes.
And, you know, since they said, well, that I'm the founding father of a separate and distinct profession, I suppose, you know, that I have to make sure that the baby behaves. And our goal now is to build the stability of our profession.
Okay.
We don't want to replace anybody.
Right.
We work in conjunction with other
Right.
professions.
Right.
And that's where we're going. And eventually, in the future, probably long after I'm gone, I think that this will become the type of profession where there will be other courses involved
Right.
on a college level.
Right.
You know, and then you could get perhaps a bachelor's degree or something,
Right.
or a master's degree that would include. You
Right.
can do that now
Right.
with certain colleges
Right.
who let you submit the curriculum you'd
Right.
like to study. There was one
Right.
up in Vermont.
Right.
And
I think Leslie do that.
yeah, and so, you know, they have their people, their
Right.
faculty come in once a month to an area like Boston,
Right.
and you have to study with them. You have to submit paperwork and so forth,
Right.
and that's a good thing.
Right.
Yeah. So you get sort of an adjunct degree,
Right.
but there are also, you know, there's so much of education going on the internet, but we're not ready for that.
Okay.
I believe that you need to have hands-on training to be.
Okay.
What I say I want our trainers to do, and we do have trainers, is that I want their students to be competent
Right.
and confident.
Yes.
So in
That's
other
right.
words, I want them
Yes.
to know the basics, and then we teach them all the other things too,
Right. Yes.
so that they you know, have proper ethics, and they know how to work
Right.
and work safely and accomplish results for their clients.
Yes.
Because that's what it's all about.
It is definitely.
Yeah, and that's why we have grown so much.
Yes.
And as I say, I'm not sure the exact figure, between 11,000 and 12,000 members
Wow.
in 71 countries.
Wow.
That's a lot of people. At our convention that we're just wrapping up,
Mhm.
we had people from 26 countries attending.
Wow.
So
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Starting from few guys in the hotel room
that's right.
to what it is today.
You know, and there are some countries like Liechtenstein.
Right.
We only have one member, but it's a
Well,
very small
it's
country,
very
so it
small.
doesn't really matter.
It's proportionally represented.
Right. Somebody said to me, "What Patricia McIsaac was one of our
Right.
fine trainers.
Right.
She has an office down in Hingham, Mass,
Right, yes.
South Shore." And Patricia said, "Well, where's Liechtenstein?" I said, "Well, it's really a country that's known for its postage stamps, and also it's like Delaware, where you can register your corporation."
Yes, that's
in
true. That's
Switzerland.
true. Yes.
And also you can get hypnotized. So, but yeah, we tried to get her here, but she
Right.
had to previous engagement.
Right.
But she practices down in Hingham,
Right.
South Shore Hypnotism Center,
Right.
and she teaches our certification course.
Right. That's great.
And
Yes.
so it's really good, and she's a nurse, and so she's got a
Right.
lot of background
Right.
that she adds to what she teaches.
Yes.
So that's good. We want people to know that if they go to a National Guild of
Right.
Hypnotists member,
They
it's somebody who is
yes.
competent.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming,
Well,
Dr. Damon.
thank you for asking me. I'm sorry it took so
No,
long.
no, it's all good. It's all good. We have our greatest pleasure having you here.
My pleasure, I'm sure.
Let's do this again sometime.
Okay.
Okay. This is Hypnotist Bernie's Exposition. Join us next week, Tuesday night, 7:30, CCTV Channel 9.